Hi, my name is Severin Grabski over at Michigan State University, and I want to thank Ephraim and for the chance to be discussing on this paper. It was an interesting paper, but from an academic's perspective, I had trouble with this paper because it wasn't laid out as a traditional academic paper. It was very much more of a thought piece and laying out various conjectures and assertions. And so what I'm going to end up doing for my discussion is really approach all of the assertions that kind of jumped out at me and just give commentary on them. So the objectives of the manuscript, very much to say, this is what we're finding out in terms of the pros and cons of incorporating big data in the financial statements audits to temper the unbounded enthusiasm that exists out there. So great. And so I'm just hopefully going to try to temper some of the assertions that were presented. So in terms of the inevitability of big data auditing, agree with that. Temper the optimism, good. Avoiding the hype cycle and the trough of disillusionment, let's try to even things out, be thoughtful about what we're doing, very much agree with that. The manuscript compares big data to artificial intelligence, web trust, continuous auditing. But my concern about that is I think they're probably a little bit different in between the environment that existed for big data, and the environment that existed for all of those other areas. So I don't think it's a one-to-one correspondence that can really be made with those. Auditors are assertions made that auditors are successfully completing the audits. But I guess my concern is, do we really know that all audits are really successfully completed? We only hear about failures that have come out over in court. We have heard about potential failures through PCAOB in terms of saying you didn't do things correctly. And so, do we really know anything? It's kind of like a patient. If a patient succeeds after getting a treatment, we know they got well, but we don't know what impact the treatment we had was that made them well. So we don't have, it's an imperfect world that's out there. And then, will the audit of 2030 look the same as it did in 1930s? I picked 1930s because the audit of today is not that far off of the 1930s audits. We're still doing the equivalent of the ticking and tying that was going on back then. The assertion that term big data within accounting that we're looking at and auditing is not the same as used elsewhere. I agree with that, but it's not just about volume. When we're looking about big data, we're all looking at the variety, the veracity, all the different types of data, the Internet of Things, social media, environmental scanning data, things of that nature. And so, really, where in this area do we want to look at it from an auditing, accounting perspective? And we really need to be thinking about all of these types of data, not just focus only on the volume. But if we do want to think about volume, let's think about Walmart. Over 1 million transactions a day. And when you look at their total data set, 2.5 petabytes of data. To me, that's starting to kind of edge into that big data realm. FICO credit card detection system, 2.1 billion accounts. And business data worldwide across all companies, 1.2. Doubles every 1.2 years. So, I think we're kind of looking in the big data area. We may be close to consistency. Big data is outside of the comfort zone for auditors. Well, it's outside of the comfort zone for almost all the companies when they first started. So what? You learn. You deal with it. Why should auditing be any different? Paradigm shift. And identifies different areas where a paradigm shift occurs. And my question is, what's the point behind it? Businesses evolve, they adapt to these changes. Auditing will also adapt to these changes. Yes, we need to be aware of these changes, but it's not a significant impediment. In terms of, comment made about big data being used to run the business proactively. Well, will not auditors want to be able to run their business proactively? And then the big question mark that's always out there is, what do regulators have to say about the use of big data and how it can be used? And so that one is a big issue that we really aren't quite sure what the answer is going to be. Again, we don't know about are all audits successful? And I guess given that we know that there have been audit failures, maybe we should have a change in the audit model. Maybe we need to be incorporating the big data. And the one paper that was referenced in the manuscript was from Hodesh et al., and they said, well, if they use data from other clients for prediction purposes, it helps out in terms of what is happening for their current client. But that one runs afoul in terms of a lot of the regulatory issues that are out there, in terms of confidentiality, using a different client's data on another client's audit. And even from the AICPA, even if the data is scrubbed and given to a third party who you can't even identify the person, the client from, you still cannot use it unless you have written permission from the client. And if we go to the Chartered Accountants of England and Wales, they have in there saying that the accountants cannot use information for the personal advantage of the professional accountant from other audits. And to me, using that in the sense of big data is using it to the advantage of the professional accountant because they're using it to further their audit of another firm. So that seems like, gee, it's probably in the same vein of their professional advantage. So using data from the other auditors, other audits conducted by the organization is concerning. Table 1 as presented in the manuscript, really liked it, the pros and comments that were made over there. Table 2, really liked how it was laid out in terms of the inhibitors, the comments, the amelioration that was presented. But then I wasn't sure if all the inhibitors were valid, such as the direct access to the client's big data. The auditors do have access, at least to the ERP system information that's required. They also have a lot of that data could be accessible via other means, that you don't need to go into the client system. And then, the one thing that Michael had mentioned and also talked about in the manuscript, okay, 1% improvement with the drug regime, you make it better for the company and they have a significant improvement. Well, if we look at this from a societal perspective, if we have a 1% improvement in audits and we have a decrease in the number of audit failures and associated lawsuits and fines and penalties that are paid out, that's going to make things better looking at auditing taken as a whole rather than just looking at it as an individual organization. In terms of increasing levels of difficulty for acceptance by auditors, more data. Well, storage is cheap these days, so that shouldn't be a problem. Messy data. Well, even in the ERP system, as you have multiple ERP systems within a single organization, you have to reconcile. So you still have messiness related to that. And correlation rather to it, and from predictive, it really looked at it from a predictive analytics perspective, and I don't really know if that's really what we need from an auditing perspective. We're trying to find out things, not necessarily predict. And then they talk about audit standard on data integrity. The data may be properly recorded, but the question is that data true? For example, for a drug company, they have tablets that they give out to all of their sales reps who go out to visit the various doctors in their offices. The drug company has identified there is the right way that you should be going through this whole sales process. And so they've trained all the sales reps to do that. And they base the pay and promotion on those sales reps based upon their volume of sales and also how well do they follow company policy. So what do the sales reps do? They go out to the doctor's office when they can get in. They go in, they talk to them for those 2 minutes, which isn't enough time to go through the whole spiel. They then go back in their car, and when they have their free time, then they go through and record everything on the tablet as they were supposed to record it for the company. Okay, we have true data recorded in the system. We are valuing this information and we are using it to address our pay for those employees. Yet, is this true data? Well, we know what the sales were, but beyond that, we have questions. Agree with the assertions about verifiability and credibility. I like the list that the manuscript provided on the research lists. Agree it's at the early stages. I'd like to have a little bit more about the cost of not incorporating big data into the audit. They gave a little bit of treatment in terms of other areas, and it seemed to me that that was more an acknowledgement that those areas exist without going much detail of what can be done. Other thoughts about tweets in the hurricane that Michael brought up at the start? To me, that again precisely identifies the problem of the lack of domain knowledge and just trying to apply a tool without having that domain understanding. And so you really need to have that domain understanding to apply the results from big data to know what it really means. You have to have in your mind, here's what I expect to have happen. You have a hypothesis that exists here, not just truly going out and letting the data talk to you, even though some people would say that's what big data tells us to do. And to me, the magical thinking aspect is that you can use big data independent of the domain knowledge. I guess other thoughts I had, at times it seemed like I was reading an anthology rather than a manuscript, since there are so many chunks of it that were quotes from elsewhere, and I'd like to know why were those chosen and not others. Again, minimal substantiation to the assertions were made, and a lot of them were assuming an all or nothing approach. But and in a sense, the manuscript seemed very much within the area of staying very true to staying only within the external audit world and not branching out outside of it. I'd like to have seen it a little bit more outside of the box. And so I'd like to have seen a little bit more about what are the issues related to the cleanup of the data, about the variety of data, to be able to say, well, how can I use the big data more? Social media, using it from a going concern perspective, structured data from operations. We have the information about production and shipping, purchases, production, shipping to receipts, purchasing to disbursements. Let's link all these pieces together from a big data perspective and see how it all ties together. Don't look at it all in isolation. Auditing is a binary outcome. That yes, it's successful or not successful, that present fairly the results of operations, but there are a lot of decisions along the way that are much more continuous in nature. We can be looking at that and all those different data types. Nature of risks, the timing, the extent of testing, how does big data impact all of those? We heard a bit more about that over in the panel. One thing about big data, we want to have a more effective and efficient audit. So to what extent can it be used within the auditing firm to help identify the right person to be working on an audit at the right time? So from a staffing perspective. So it takes it out of the audit itself, but more from an administration of the organization. Other audit applications, environmental sensors and factory production. Environmental sensors exist everywhere. And if we have a factory, we know what the amount of particulates that are produced under normal production load. Do we see that same level of particulates being produced, and is that consistent with what the assertions are for the level of production? So let's be thinking a bit more outside the box of big data and where we can get the data from. And if you're looking at tweets, this was a project that was done by MS student over in analytics over at my school, and it essentially was, in red is VW, Volkswagen, trying to control the damage for the Dieselgate that's going on, and the black is everyone else tweeting about it. From an auditor's perspective, what will the impact be for a going concern? What can we be saying what's going to be happening for the organization? And so it's just a little bit of a quick example about, we can have a lot of access to this data. It's not all proprietary and internal to the organization. And I think I've got, the big thing is, we need to find the right signal, have a sensible model, establish what the tasks need to be done for use of the data, and we need to have the right time period. And again, it's that deep domain knowledge that's required, and that's where the external auditors, in my opinion, provide that significant value added to the use of big data. And so, and in terms of just one other part going on, PwC in the something that was just released a couple days ago on audit quality. Second item over here, that deep and broad understanding of the client's businesses and financial environments in which they operate. It's that deep knowledge that's really required to be able to be used with the big data. And so, manuscript accomplished its goals. It got me to be thinking about big data and auditing. There's more to big data and auditing than I think is presented in the manuscript. I think they could be doing much more than was done, but it's a good start. And I'd like to go further outside of that comfort zone of where they currently are sitting. So with that, thank you.